Arsenal to face PSV Eindhoven in the UEFA Champions League round of 16. We'll discuss how the tournament is shaping on if we look beyond that as well. And we'll preview our Premier League clash with West Ham United, plus loads more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Delighted to say that back with me for the second Friday in a row is the brilliant Mike Stavrou. Mike, welcome back, mate. How are you? How's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. It's been a busy week. Actually quite quiet in the world of Arsenal, would you say, for once, which is good.
Yeah, it has. It's been a weird week, hasn't it? Like I've got to say, like there's been a couple of days this week where I've gone to record podcasts and I've been scraping the barrel in terms of finding stories. And we normally start a conversation and things sort of escalate from there and you branch off onto different subjects. So we kind of made it work, I think. But yeah, it has been a slow week, and I'm glad that we're obviously back in action tomorrow. We will focus on that game against West Ham United. It's a massive game for the Gunners. Every single game feels like that at the moment, given the position we're in, given what we're looking to achieve between now and the end of the campaign. But I do want to start off, Mike, by looking at the Champions League draw, which has finished, half an hour ago at the time of us recording this. What do you think then? PSV, it was either PSV or Feyenoord. And people were asking me last night, which one would you prefer? And to be honest with you, I wasn't that majorly fussed. But obviously, getting one means you're on one side of the draw. Getting the other would have meant something different. What's your reaction, first of all, to the fact that we're going to take on PSV? Do you feel like it's a good time?
Yeah, I feel like either one of those, I think, we would go into the game as favourites. I did before this watch back the highlights of PSV's win against Juventus. Obviously, they got that last minute goal, but they kind of battered them, really. And when I looked at the stats, that 25 shots, 60% possession, but I kind of was looking at that team and thinking there's quite a lot of threat there. So as much as you say it's a good draw, I think in the Champions League you've always got to be wary, haven't you? Because teams step it up, and you've got to go away as well in an uncomfortable environment that we're not used to. So I think it's definitely a good draw in terms of the other teams. Like look at Liverpool drawing PSG. I mean that PSG a few years ago you probably wouldn't be too worried about. This iteration of PSG under Luis Enrique, they look really, really good.
They look more like a team, don't they?
Yeah, much more. We did a little an episode on PSG last year, so about a few months after Mbappe left, and I actually spoke to some PSG fans before our game against them at the Emirates, and they were all kind of happy that Mbappe had gone in a way. Like it's sad that he'd left, but almost happy because they could become an actual team again. So yeah, that's definitely a difficult test for Liverpool. But yeah, my thoughts and feelings were slightly different to yours. I looked at that side of the draw, and I mean, we've basically got all of the best teams in the tournament. I would say that we could potentially face outside of Bayern. So it's obviously, you get past PSV, then it's Madrid or Atletico, and then if we get past them, and if Liverpool beat PSG, it's Liverpool. So yeah, I mean, strap in.
It's going to be fun. Listen, that's what the Champions League is all about. You messaged me when the draw come out, and my response was, actually, I can't repeat my response on a podcast, but it was basically bring them all on. They are peeps, a lot of them. Let's do it. I think this is what the Champions League is all about. Like, just on the PSV tie, first of all, I looked at them against Juve the other night, and I watched the extra time, and I didn't think they were amazing. I know that they've done really well to get to this stage, but the other thing that kind of encourages me about playing Dutch opposition, and this would have been the same if it was Feyenoord, is that they're quite front-footed. They're quite forward-thinking teams. And one of our big problems has been dealing with those low blocks. And if we had faced a Juventus or a Milan, that's exactly what we would have come up against, a really well-drilled, well-organized side looking to stifle us. With both the Dutch teams, and obviously we've landed with PSV, I feel like they will come at us. I think they will have a go. I think that's Peter Bosch's playing style. And then if you look back to, and I know sort of from one season to the next, it's a long time and a lot can change and a lot is different, but you look at how comfortable we were in dealing with them last season. And I know we've got players missing now, etc. 4-0 at home. and a 1-1 draw at the Philips Stadion when we had Mikel Arteta making a whole host of changes.
It was wrapped up, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd already won the group. There was nothing really to play for, and he sort of shuffled the pack a little bit. And he did make some changes. I remember coming away from that game thinking he should have made more. Do you remember that? There was a conversation around that time about him maybe making more changes.
Yeah.
But look, we dealt with them really, really comfortably. You take it on to Real Madrid or Atletico Madrid. There's a couple of things here. First of all, we'd be at home in the first leg, which I don't think is ideal. You want to go to the Bernabeu or the Wanda Metropolitano first. I do think people are looking at this, Mike, and saying, well, it's Real Madrid. And while that would be the glamour tie and the one that I think a lot of people would love, I wouldn't write off Atleti, They're a really stubborn side. They're a horrible side to play against tactically. They are more than capable of putting in a performance that stifles even the great Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. It's one that we shouldn't sort of assume the outcome of, right?
Well, we've got a pretty dicey history against them, haven't we? With that, was it a semi-final in the Europa League over 2 legs? The Antoine Griezmann fortnight celebration game. I'm sure everyone remembers.
Yep.
I mean that was kind of like late stage banter era for Arsenal. So yeah, not the best memories, but in general, like I completely agree with the sentiment you were putting across. I would love to play Madrid. I think it's been a long time since we played them, and it's just one of those ties that essentially, like you say, you're in the Champions League for, and you're playing up against all the best players. You're playing against arguably one of the best managers of this generation, and it would just be fun, really. Like, it would just be fun to see us against them. I mean, the obvious thing here is that it will be really fun to see us full strength against these kind of teams. What we can actually put out on the pitch versus what our best version is a completely different conversation, and it is almost a bit of a shame because, if we did have Saka, if we did have Kai Havertz, and we did have Gabriel Martinelli, you'd say Madrid maybe slight favourites. Obviously, I'm completely dismissing PSV here to any PSV fans listening. We've not just completely written you off, but we're looking a bit further down the line. But yeah, like full strength 11 versus 11. I don't think they're miles better than us, especially in a knockout game. But obviously, what we have to factor in when we talk about Europe is our record in Europe and how poor we've been. Not even just in the Champions League, but in the Europa League. So under Arteta, I'm talking about. So yeah, I think that has to be factored in. But I agree with you. It is exciting, like that possibility. Even though it's scary, it's both sides of it, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I always have this argument with people every year when we talk about Champions League draws. I always say, look, if you're not in it to face these teams, what the hell are you in it for? But just to circle back to the sort of Real Madrid Atleti tie, and again, I know we're kind of assuming that Arsenal are going to progress. I would go as far as saying that anything other than Arsenal progression against PSV will go down as a massive failure because we are better than them. Yeah. And even with the injuries, that isn't an excuse for me. Arsenal should be getting past PSV Eindhoven. Anything less than that, I won't be happy. I know many others won't be happy either. But on the Real Madrid Atleti thing, there's only a point separating them in La Liga. Like literally 1 point. Atletico Madrid are very, very competitive again this season. They went through a period under Diego Symeou where you started to wonder if the kind of cycle had come to a little bit of an end and if it was time for them to try something different. And he's managed to just turn it back around again and get them in a really strong position. So, yeah, either way, that'll be incredibly tough, won't it? You mentioned we got kind of that side of the draw. We could have had Bayern on the other side. I know a lot of Arsenal fans have got a little bit of maybe PTSD with regards to what happened against Bayern last year. But honestly, looking at them now, I know we've got injuries. I know we've got our problems. And that is a massive factor when assessing our chances against these sides. But I looked at them against Celtic the other night and I just thought, you know what? We can get at you. I would back Mikel Arteta tactically against Vincent Kompany any day of the week.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, and just looking at that other side of the draw that we missed, obviously, like, I mean, to be honest, I think Leverkusen will beat them over 2 legs, because I watched their game recently and I don't know how Leverkusen didn't win that game. Obviously, Florian Wirtz missed a last-minute open goal, essentially. But they battered them in that game. They should have really beaten them, and it's a bit of a shame because their season Leverkusen has been quite good, to be fair, considering what they produced last season, and to be able to follow that up, I think they've done a good job. But it's just in those key moments against Bayern, they've not managed to make it count. So yeah, looking at that side of the draw, obviously, like we probably would have fancied ourselves a lot more, especially the other side. You look at Benfica, Barca, and then Dortmund against Lille. I mean, that's not a bad potential semi-final, is it? If you end up on that side of the draw, so yeah, I think we've slightly got unlucky, but as you say, it is the Champions League, so you've got to play them at some stage.
Absolutely. What I would hate would be like a semi-final against Liverpool. I don't think I could deal with that. I hate the ties between two sides from the same country. It just defeats the object of European competition for me. But hey, it is what it is. Let's take some of your comments very, very quickly on this Champions League draw, and then we're going to move on and focus on what's coming up at the weekend. A huge game against West Ham United. We're going to talk about the starting 11. What should it look like? Does Mikel Merino continue up front, for instance? We'll have a quick look at how West Ham United are doing. There's loads and loads to get into around that one. Ryan says the CL is all about winning it and attracting world-class players. Yeah, that's the dream, innit? That's the dream. Kwame says, you're right, Harry, we're better than PSV. Jid says, massive failure, sort of responding to my comment where I said that anything less than progression against PSV would go down in my books as a failure. He says, this is a team in the round of 16 of the Champions League. Let's not disrespect them with this whole because we are Arsenal arrogance. I think you can look at your team and see them as really strong favourites in a tie without being disrespectful to the opposition. I think those two opinions can coexist. Yes, okay, they're in the round of 16. I thought they were a little bit lucky over the two legs against Juventus, and I don't particularly rate this Juventus side. So my opinion is formed based on that. Do you agree with that statement, Mike? Would it be a massive failure, or do you think I've gone a bit overboard there? Feel free to put me in my place.
No, I think it would be a massive failure, considering the given where we are as a team and the sort of stage of the project that we're at. We've been in it's our second season back in the Champions League. The first one was disappointing, I would say, because it was the manner of the defeat to Bayern. It kind of did make us feel like it did with those back-to-back 5-1s back in the day, because of the nature of it, and we should have won, but just didn't have the clinical edge, and it was a real sort of moment to point out how far we need to go. So I think we need to prove ourselves and go one step further. And I think Arteta needs it for himself, to be honest, because he's not got a good record in Europe, as we've discussed. It's kind of felt like, I don't know about you, but from an outside perspective, it's kind of felt like an afterthought a bit. Like even going back to the Champions League last year, I know it was big because it was our first one, but going back to the Europa League as well, it was just like, oh yes, Europa League. League's obviously the focus here. But yeah, I don't ever sense that it's been his real top priority. And really, as Arsenal fans, even though we would really love to win the Premier League again after so long, the Champions League is the jewel in the crown that's missing. So if anything, I think in a season like this, I'm not saying you prioritize one or the other, and especially given the injuries that we have, I think it's hard to even do that from a practical sense. But I think we need to put all of our eggs in the Champions League basket. So if we did go out against a team that are a lot weaker than us, I think, yeah, of course it will be a huge failure.
Yeah, for sure. John has just brought this up in the chat. I don't know if this is right, because I haven't checked it, but we'll take your word for it. John, you're normally a very, very good source. He says, Harry, if we manage to beat PSV and then Madrid, we could face Liverpool 3 times in a row, twice in the Champions League, with a league game in the middle of that. Bloody hell, could you imagine that? Could you imagine that if the league title was still at stake? That would be...
Jesus.
I don't know how I would cope with that period of time, to be honest with you. That would be awful, in fact.
Yeah.
S says, lots of response to my comment. With the lack of attacking options, it would not be a massive failure. I still think it would. I still think it would. I still think a club of Arsenal's resource versus PSV Eindhoven should be able to cope with even the high number of injuries that we have and progress through this tie. I don't care if we do it 1-0. I don't care if we do it with a goal off of Gabriel's backside. I'm not interested in how it happens as long as it does. NSW says, Harry, I think based on our injury reality, our quality has dipped. I mean, we currently are not that confident we can win in the league in our current form. PSV are a threat in the UCL. Let's not ignore that. Again, I'm not being disrespectful to them, but I've got my bar where I think it should be when it comes to Arsenal. And that's how I see it. And I will maintain that throughout whatever happens over the course of the next few weeks. Mike, shall we turn our attentions to a couple of other stories, and then, of course, that game against West Ham United at the weekend? Let's do it. Okay, so there have been some rumours, Mike, swirling around this morning that Arsenal would agree to deal with Roberto Olabe to come in as the sporting director. It's not come out of the blue, this is a name that we've heard linked with the club quite a bit. What I will stress is at the time of recording, this has not been reported by any of the normal, reliable sources, if you like. It hasn't come from David Ornstein. It hasn't come from any of the likes. So I am a little bit cautious about this report, and I don't want to go too big on its kind of accuracy and all the rest of it. But I do think it raises an interesting question, because obviously we've had some time now to calm down after the transfer window. There was a lot of frustration in the air. We've moved on from it. And we've got to focus on the pitch now, and with regards to, what we need to do rather than worrying about who we didn't sign. I'm very much of the opinion, though, Mike, that I would like to see an external candidate come in for the role. Does what happened in January influence that? And are you in agreement or disagreement? What's your take on it?
I think ultimately we need an external candidate, because I don't know enough about Jason Ato, and you could argue that, he's had time to learn under Edu, and he would have garnered experience from that. But I think there's no sort of experience like you can have been out in the field and leading that project on your own. And the name that has sort of been circling among Arsenal ITKs on Twitter that I saw this morning, last night, was Olabe from Real Sociedad. And obviously I think that makes a lot of sense. He's obviously leaving in the summer. He's going to be looking for a club. It kind of lines up. And just looking through his kind of back catalogue of the players that he's brought through at Sociedad, I mean, it's a pretty good list. Obviously, Isak and Odegaard are the main ones, and we're beneficiaries in terms of Odegaard and Mikel Merino as well. And then in terms of youth products, Oyarzabal has been a great player for them. Zubimendi is a key one, because I imagine if Olabe is going to come in, then that deal is pretty much wrapped up, because he's just going to bring him with him. And then also, a few other names, Robin Lenormand, and obviously, like in terms of experience, he brought David Silva there, and Nacho Monreal, etc. So I think he's got a pretty good track record. Obviously, we have seen a bit of a dip into the Spanish market under Arteta in general, and I think obviously Merino, Zubimendi, and Odegaard obviously shown that. So I think I would rather, just my own perspective, is that I'd rather someone who's got that experience doing it at a high level, can come in, and also the other side of it, which we've spoken about before, is holding Arteta to power, and just saying, checking that power, and giving an alternative voice from someone who's not been promoted from within. And I think that's a really important thing, because I think the partnership between Edu and Arteta worked so well because they worked in tandem. It wasn't kind of a hierarchy like from the outside anyway. So you would worry a little bit with an internal hire and how that might be slightly different.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think you need to sanity check Mikel Arteta's work. Not that I'm not all for him, and not that I'm not a supporter. I think he's done amazingly well. But I always think it's a much healthier environment when there is a bit of challenge and there is someone to push back on you. I think the counter argument that some people would make is that if the club were to hire Roberto Olabe, it would be partly because Mikel Arteta had some influence there, in which case how much challenge is there actually going to be, or do they already feel that they're on the same page, therefore that's why it fits? I think there's got to be a certain level of kind of connection. I think there needs to be some synergy between them. Otherwise, it doesn't work, right? You can't have one completely at one end of the spectrum and one at the other. So there needs to be some of that, but there also needs to be that challenge. And I do think you're more likely to get that with an external candidate than you are by bringing in someone or promoting someone from within. Whoever this person is needs to be not only great at spotting talent, not only great at sort of supporting Mikel Arteta, but I think needs to be a kind of, what's the word? A bit of a salesman. Like I was at the Guna Talks live event last night. Big shout out to Tom. Fantastic event that he put together. And I think, was it Clive Palmer said, I think it was Clive Palmer. Forgive me if it wasn't, but I think it was him who said you would buy a used car off of Edu, wouldn't you? Because he's got that charm. And you need a sporting director, I think, that has that can convince people of the project. I don't know enough about Olabe to know if he does have that. I don't know enough about Jason Ato to know where he ranks in terms of that. But I feel like someone with a bit more experience and a bit more clout might just help us in that department.
Well, yeah, and I think that's an important thing because I think over the Wenger era, one of the hardest and most difficult things was that he was essentially the mouthpiece for everything. And whenever the multiple directors spoke over the years, if they did, they didn't really seem to. I'm talking about Ivan Gazidis here. We didn't really want to hear from them. We weren't really interested in it. Whereas Edu, as you say, he bridged that gap between the ownership, silent Stan before Josh came on the scene, and he really, as an ex-pro, helped rebuild that connection between us and the decision makers, because we went through all that time where it was like, is it Arsene Wenger? Is he in control of the purse strings, or is it the Cronkies, or what part of the ownership is not letting us have this money? Whereas actually, if you just have someone who can communicate directly to you, whether that is Josh Kroenke or whether that was Edu, it makes it so much easier to try and digest. Now, we're not always going to like what they have to say, but at least if we kind of understand what the vision is and you're able to communicate and outline that, I think that's a really sort of underrated part of things, to be honest.
Communication is everything. I think we've seen that with Arteta over Emery. In terms of even when it's not going the way you want it to, if you get that clear communication and you feel like you have an understanding of what the plan is and how we're attacking things, you can get on board. You can give that little bit more leeway. I always feel that way in anything. I think communication is massive, and being able to do that is huge. So I do agree a sporting director needs to have that and needs to be plugged in to not just Mikel Arteta, not just to the ownership, not just to the board, but to the fans as well. Edu had that because A, he's a charmer, but B, he's an ex-player and he played for us during a very successful era. And so there was always that warm feeling towards him anyway, which I think set him in a good position to kind of begin that role. Let's move on then to the game against West Ham, because this is a massive game. And I just wonder, Mike, if Liverpool have just left the door open. So, of course, Liverpool dropped some points, Mike, in midweek away at Aston Villa, which means that Arsenal have the opportunity on Saturday to close the gap on them to just 5 points before, of course, they go to Manchester City at the weekend. First of all, do you feel like Liverpool are having a bit of a wobble? Do you look at them and feel like they're far more vulnerable than they were maybe 2-3 months ago?
Yeah, and it's happened a few games in a row. And I think I mentioned on the last pod, they've always been able to have Salah to kind of bail them out, but on the last two occasions he has done the business, but it's his teammates that's not been able to do it when it counts, like Darwin Núñez. And I think they're kind of having a bit of a problem where there's so much reliance on Salah. Obviously Gakpo's missed a few games. It's like Salah can't score 3 goals a game. He's probably going to contribute at least a goal and assist. I think he's got a crazy record this season of a goal and assist in 10 games or something, which is getting close to a record. And that's pretty incredible, for a player who's a winger, not a striker. But I think that sort of over-reliance with the jitteriness, like was it the second half against Wolves where I didn't have a shot or shot? I mean, that that speaks to a team that is scared about their position. and is a little bit thinking about, okay, well, yeah, we're in the lead now, but we're getting to the business end and we need to close this out. But it's about how you sort of balance that sort of rock and roll football with the classical control. And I think Slot's, had it down to a T before the last few games, but in the last few games, we've kind of started to see signs where they're maybe not able to control as well as they would want to.
And you do feel like this is a massive week. Obviously, they went to Villa, which was a game that there was a possibility they'd drop points in. They did. They go to City at the weekend. It's just a shame that they're in such rotten form. I know they've improved a little bit in the league lately, but you just watched them in midweek and they were battered, weren't they, by Real Madrid? But then they play Newcastle at home. Now, I'm not saying that Newcastle turn up at Anfield and win, but that is a game that could potentially end in a draw. You never know.
Yeah.
And we've got obviously Forest to come in midweek, and we've got a real opportunity to really apply some pressure on them. So it does feel like if the turnaround is going to happen, I'm not saying it needs to be complete this week, but it needs to start, doesn't it? We need to see a bit more in terms of chipping away at their lead to be confident. On Man City, they've won 3 of their last 4 in the league. It's not bad. But watching them in midweek, and there's rumours as well that Erling Haaland's not going to be available at the weekend.
Oh, really?
Which is just our luck, isn't it? Maybe Marmoush will score another hat-trick. I don't know. Who knows? But from an Arsenal perspective, I think we can agree that the game against Leicester last weekend was pretty shit. I think I said in my radio report at halftime that it was the worst half of Premier League football I've watched in years, and I stick by that. In years, genuinely.
Years. Wow.
And I'm including like your Burnley Fulhams in that. Like, I'm talking Premier League generally was that bad.
Wow.
What did you make of the whole Mikel Merino thing? And is that something you'd persist with moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's 2 facets to this, really, because I think on one level, he came on in the 70th minute and had a decisive impact. But I think coming on in the 70th minute when you're on to do a specific job, which is basically get in the box and try and get in the end of something, which he did do, and he did very well to his credit. Obviously, the goal, the header from Nwaneri's cross was a really intelligent movement, a really great header, and a perfect delivery. And then Trossard's cross was just on point. And that we don't really seem to create many moments like that at the moment. So whether we'll be able to do that consistently over 90 minutes and whether he'll be able to do that up front is something different. But then I guess we're hamstrung in a way, because we had this chat last week about Raheem Sterling. We said, maybe, trying to cope, trying to find some hope somewhere. Maybe, he's got the shirt now. He's not behind anyone. And then we saw what happened. I mean, it was kind of inevitable, but I think I was trying to cling on to anything I could just to, inject me with some possibility. It didn't happen. So I think, as much as I'm saying don't expect Merino to sort of produce another, 2 goals again, or even get a goal, I think we have to do it, but simply because Raheem Sterling is so bad. Okay. Yeah. What can you say?
I, like you last week, was of the opinion that, we're really short on attackers. Raheem Sterling's one of the 3 that we have available. Experienced player, senior player, has been there, done it. Okay, maybe his level generally has dropped, but could we extract something out of him for the next month or so while we're waiting for some of our players to come back? And I did feel like you couldn't start the Leicester game by leaving him out. I felt like if you did that, it would send a message to Raheem Sterling that says, mate, even when I'm on my knees and desperate, you're not the solution. And if you're talking about a player who's shot of confidence, that can't possibly help. And so I was all for him starting in that game with a view to maybe changing it as the game went on. And then I watched this performance at Leicester, and my mind has completely changed on this. There's no going back for me now on this. Do we need to keep him sweet to a degree because we're short? Just need to keep him fit in case of an emergency is what I would say right now, because, the way he was hooked off at Leicester, the way he showed no urgency to get off the pitch as well, that really frustrated me. And there were ironic cheers from the travelling Arsenal support. Now, if the away support have lost their faith in you, and our away support are incredible and incredibly loyal, if they've turned, then there's a problem here. And can you imagine what that response would have been like had he been taken off after playing like that at the Emirates? Can you imagine the moans and groans at home? It might have been Granit Xhaka 2.0. Like it would have got that
Yeah,
bad, I think, from the fans. So yeah, I'm just of the opinion now that you can't justify him starting. You can't. And whether that's Mourinho up front or something else, I don't know, because I do have my reservations like you about the Mourinho thing and the game state in which we saw it work, and obviously the level of the opposition as well. But yeah, I don't think you can start Raheem Sterling. Should we try and play around with the lineup a little bit
let's
and
do it.
see, let's see what we think it's going to look like. So I've sort of picked mine here, but obviously we'll discuss it and you can of course change it, do what you like with it. I've gone for the benefit of those listening on audio: Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and I've gone Calafiori at left back. We'll come back to that in a minute. Partey, Odegaard, and Rice as my midfield. Nwaneri on the right, Trossard on the left, and Marino at centre forward. Is there anything there that you disagree with? I think people will be asking about the left back situation, but your thoughts?
I mean, I just want to just point out that, you know, if we had a time machine and I took a screenshot of this front three, you know, the rest of it's fine, and showed you at the beginning of the season and said to you, Harry, in February, we're 5 points behind Liverpool, we're in the title race, and this is the front three we're playing. What would your reaction be, do you think?
I would have laughed. I would have spilt my coffee. It's so
Spat it out.
It's such a weak forward line, isn't it? And like, there's a part of me that looks at it and goes, Ethan Nwaneri, 17 years old, what a talent. Like, I was blown away by his performance at Leicester last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It was superb. But there's also this nagging voice in the back of my head that keeps saying, as bloody good as he is, he's 17 years old and we should not be in this position.
100%.
And then there's Trossard, who's got a history of impact in games. But for us, I would argue, probably more so from the substitutes bench. We're having to start him. I think a part of my thinking in the forward line, and another reason why I don't want to see Sterling in the starting 11, is because I think by playing Trossard at centre forward, we're not only, you know, having to struggle through watching Raheem Sterling for 90 minutes or however long he plays, but we're also taking away from Leandro Trossard's best position. And so it's having a knock-on effect, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately you're weakening two positions there. And that's the point, isn't it? Like, would you rather weaken one position and it looks a bit funny playing midfielder up front, or would you rather weaken both? I mean, the only thing I'll probably disagree with you there is dropping Miles Lewis-Skelly. I think he's not, you know, maybe he's not been as, like, he's not kept up the performance levels quite to the same standard as he had in the first few weeks when he was in the team.
Do you not think?
But yeah, maybe he just had a sort of a slight natural drop off. But you know, that's completely expected. But almost like that thing is that I shouldn't have an issue with a teenager getting arrested for a game, because it's just completely normal. And that's where I agree with you with Nwaneri. It's like the biggest failing of last summer and January is the fact that we put the players in that position. And I think, like, yeah, of course, sometimes injuries can't be avoided, and it is unlucky to an extent to have all three of your first choice attackers out with hamstring injuries. I think there is an extent to that, but then, you know, I don't want to talk about the transfer window, but you know, the fact that I'm looking at this team sheet and seeing Ethan Nwaneri, we've got no option but to play him. Like, if I said to you, who else could we play? There's no one like that. You'd have to be playing a defender in a wing position. I just think that, like, for a team in of our standing, you know, 6 years into a project, 5 years into a project, it's just, it kind of makes me a bit upset a bit, because it's like, yes, he's fantastic, but you know, he got an injury, and like you said, he's young, so he recovered. But what if we did lose him as well? Because that's not out of the realms of possibility. Like, we're hampering, you know, the future star of this team. Now you got me. Well, I've got myself wound up here, but it just kind of blows my mind how we are. You know, we made our way from the banter era all the way to becoming a serious team again, and then we do such unserious things like that, like leaving Nwaneri having to start every week, it just kind of blows my mind, mate, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't disagree. We've been over the transfer window a load of times. I said I was going to stop moaning about it, so I'm really trying hard. It does keep coming up because it's a big part of the context of where we're at today, right? The fact that we didn't go and do anything has left us short, and that's why we're talking about the issues that we're talking about now. Just back to the kind of left back position for a minute. The reason I picked Calafiori over Miles Lewis-Skelly in my 11, it's not necessarily what I think Mikel Arteta will do. I don't know. His press conference hasn't taken place yet, so we don't know of any potential injury issues just yet. We're going to hear from him, I think, a little bit later on this afternoon. But we're recording this before that, so his comments will need to be taken into consideration if you're listening to this a little bit later on. But we've got a big game coming up on Wednesday night as well at Nottingham Forest. And one of the things I think that Calafiori gives us is he gives us a little bit more spontaneity and a little bit more aggression in attack than Miles Lewis-Skelly does. I think Miles Lewis-Skelly is at the point now where actually defensively, I really, really trust him. Offensively, I think he's clearly got the capability because he's played in more advanced roles throughout his career. He is a midfielder by trade, as we keep saying. But I just feel like Calafiori's braveness and forcefulness at times is going to be a weapon that we can use when we're trying to deal with low blocks. And I expect at the weekend that we will face a low block. I think we will face a low block at Forest as well. But being at home means we can be a bit bolder and braver in our approach. And I think Calafiori could be key in terms of helping us unlock this West Ham team. So it's not a slight on Miles Lewis-Skelly. It's not that I think he doesn't deserve to play. I think I would give them one game each. And if I'm choosing who I think suits what game best, I think Calafiori suits playing against West Ham at home. And I think Miles Lewis-Skelly suits us in the game against... suits us in the game against Nottingham Forest in midweek.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout. And to be fair, like we are probably going to be facing two low blocks. So it's a decent time to have a little test, I guess, with Calafiori and see how that changes and can add a little bit more in attack. And then if it goes well, obviously at home, there's a bit less risk with West Ham at home. We can take that into the Forest game, which I think is going to be a really, really tough game, to be honest, because I don't think they're really turned up. I don't know what you think, but I don't think they really turned up in the home fixture. Like they weren't anywhere near at their best. I think it was the game after the international break. So it did have that kind of feel of it early in the season. But I think we're going to see a completely different side, especially away from home as well. So I think we'll need to experiment slightly. And I think, always in these situations when you've got such a glaring hole, i.e. having no striker, as you say, you need to look for other areas in the team where you can help alleviate that pressure on an out of position midfielder. And, is that Rice bursting into the box a bit more? Is that Calafiori bursting into the box a bit more? I think that's probably a sensible thing to try.
We also talked last week, obviously, because we were discussing Ben White. He was on the bench for the game against Leicester, didn't get on. I was kind of hoping he'd get a few minutes because I think he's going to be important in the run of games that we've got coming up. I do feel, and again, I picked Timber because I wouldn't start Ben White having had no minutes. But I do feel like Ben White is another factor that we have to consider. Like our attack is on its knees, right? We've got minimal options. We have to think outside of the box. And one of the things I think we've lacked in Ben White's absence, as great as a defender as Jurrien Timber is those overlaps, is that sort of slightly more calm approach when getting into the final third. That eye for a pass that I think Ben White has that maybe Jurrien Timber doesn't always display. I think, look, we haven't got the attackers, so we've got to find other ways, like you say, of opening people up. Ben White coming back in the team could help us in an attacking sense as well, I feel. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is not derogatory towards Ben White anyway, but it's a bit more simple, like the way that he plays. Like he does just tend to overlap and cross the ball in. Where I think Jurrien Timber, he's got more technical prowess, so he maybe takes a few more touches. Maybe he floats into more inverted positions. Whereas Ben White, almost that right back, a bit of an old school right back. Where he just literally gets the ball, and if he is tasked with going forward, and that's what the manager asks of him, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes he's more defensive, and the left back goes on. He does just overlap, and I think with Ethan on the right wing, his tendency is to come inside. So I'd like to think that him and Ben White could build up maybe a sort of temporary similar relationship as Saka with Ben White. So yeah, I'd love to see it, and also, like, the main thing is just giving these players a rest, because I feel like I've seen this front six. We'll take out Calafiori for Miles Lewis-Skelly. I've seen that sort of back four and midfield three a lot, and I just feel like we need to kind of rotate there as well. If we're asking them to play every game, it's going to be tough.
For sure. Just very quickly on West Ham United, they've got a few injury issues going into the weekend's game. Lucas Paqueta has got a knock. Not sure he's going to be available. He suffered an ankle injury in training this week, and he's a doubt. Crescencio Somerville's out. Vladimir Soufal is out. Mikel Antonio and Nicholas Fulkrug are, of course, kind of long-term absentees. So we're not the only side going into this fixture with some injuries. We're going to do a prediction bit in just a minute. But if you guys have got any questions for the last few minutes of the show, chuck them in. Let us know what kind of game you expect to see at the weekend. If you've got any predictions too that you want to throw into the live chat, now's the time to do it. Just before we get on to predictions and having a little bit more of a chat around the West Ham game specifically, please do, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. The likes really, really do help. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have 150 on the live stream. There's more than enough of you watching for that. And if you're listening on audio, please leave us a review, because reviews really, really do help, as we keep mentioning and discussing. So yeah, like, subscribe, review, all the rest of it. Mike, in terms of a prediction, then how do you see this one going, mate? Because there's a part of me that looks at this and goes, West Ham United under David Moyes would have come and parked the bus. Graham Potter, in theory, wouldn't do that. But then I look at his injury list, and I think maybe he feels that's the only way to go. Because if you look at where they are in the table, they're down in 16th, which is ultimately why they had to make the managerial change. But they haven't won in their last 4 in the Premier League, so confidence won't exactly be high there.
No, exactly. And I mean, just kind of think back to this fixture last year. Was it last year, the 2-0, or was it the season before? My memory's gone. When they beat us,
it was last
in
season.
December. It was last season. Yeah,
I think it was last season.
I think it was when because it was kind of like a bit of a. We went through that period where we lost to Fulham on New Year's Eve, and then we'd also lost to West Ham. I could be completely butchering things, but I'm pretty sure it was last season. So yeah, under David Moyes, the tendency was to park the bus. But I think, given that the game is away for them, and I just looked at their sort of last few fixtures, and probably the most similar one was when they went to Stamford Bridge on the 3rd of Feb, and looking at their possession total for that game, it was 32%. And they had injury issues that day as well. So I think we're going to see a similar sort of game plan. Like, Graham Potter is flexible. I think he's not sort of like a Roberto De Zerbi, who's completely wedded to a style of playing system and will play regardless of who he has available. So I think Potter is willing to switch it up a little bit. But I think we're gonna have to, like I said last week, I think we're gonna have to try and 1-0 our way to the title. It's not going to be pretty. We're not going to enjoy it probably, but I just think we have to rely on what we do have, which is a fit defense, and rely on that to get us through games, which we've been doing already this season, but it's obviously to an even higher extent now with all the attackers out.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of positive predictions coming through. We got a 2-0, a 3-0, a 3-1, a 4-0, a 2-1. So lots of people feeling good going into this game. I'm feeling pretty good, but because of the issues that we keep talking about, there is a part of me that is still a little bit concerned. Let's take a couple of questions very, very quickly before we round off and share our predictions. Nacho Monreal, not the Nacho Monreal. I'm sure he's got better things to do than listen to us. Can we get Pogba for a short while till the end of the season? Is that something that you would explore? I mean, I don't really feel like midfield's a need.
No, I don't think so.
Simple.
No,
Simple.
yeah.
No. Guitar Solo says, H, if we start Marino and he clearly isn't working out in the game, then what? What do we play? Who do we play?
That's really hard. I mean, I don't really think you can change it because there was like for all the reasons that we've been speaking about Raheem Sterling. Is he more likely to do something coming off the bench? I mean, we've seen him start and be bad. We've seen him come off the bench and be bad. So yeah, I mean, look, I would love to at the end of this season probably just see an interview with Raheem Sterling and try and understand like what's going on with him. Like, is it a physical thing that his legs have just left him? Is it a mental thing that he's he's fed up? Because it's just been such a strange sort of case, and it's kind of like the part of football where we as fans we can only guess. We don't know what's going on in someone's life. So like genuinely, like obviously I'm annoyed from seeing what's on the pitch, but just genuinely interested to see like how a guy goes from being like going to such heights in his career and winning Premier League titles and being a pretty key cog in a really amazing Pep Guardiola team to then being at this stage. So in answer to that question, I mean, I guess if it's not working, we'd have to move Trossard up front. Do we maybe push Calafiori further forward? I mean, I've sort of I muted that last week, and you laughed at me, but I mean, we are that desperate for options that it could be. If we can't trust Sterling, we're saying, then I don't know what other options there are.
I think I said last week that I wouldn't play Marino up front. So what do I know? Forget about what I say. It doesn't really matter. Jid says, ostracizing Sterling, knowing that we are short and an injury away from needing him and ready to help with the games we have to play, would be a decision so dumb, it would be a sackable offense. Now, I don't think that dropping the guy from the starting 11 is ostracizing him. I think you've gone a little bit overboard there on what that would be. He ain't playing well. He's not playing well. He's not performing. He's not delivering.
He's not playing at all.
He's not playing at all. Exactly. He's not delivering anything like what we expect from him. And clearly what Mikel Arteta expects from him as well. Why should he just get a free pass because we've got injuries? If there's an alternative option that can help us, then you've got to look at that. You've got to prioritize the team over Raheem Sterling's feelings. Like that's just where we're at. I got to be honest. In my 11, Mike, I picked Marino as the starting centre forward. I would not be surprised in the slightest if we turned up at the Emirates Stadium tomorrow and Raheem Sterling's name was on the team sheet. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Not because Raheem Sterling deserves to play, because I think there is something in the conversation that we've sort of vaguely touched upon and sort of keep circling back round to, I think, around whether or not this Marino thing can work from the start. I think that's the thing. If there was full faith that that would work from the start, then Sterling don't get a look in. That's the reality. And it's not ostracizing him. He's been poor, and therefore the manager has to pick the best players to get the job done. You can't be worrying about, whether Raheem Sterling gets upset or not. We're too far past that.
Well, I think like you have to point out that he's not our player as well. He's on loan. So at the end of the day, like we're not going to bend over backwards to make him happy when it doesn't benefit our team. And would we prioritize maybe giving Mikel Marino an emergency position after doing so well? Yeah, of course you would, because he's here to stay and Raheem Sterling's not. Like, I don't know whether this guy is like Raheem Sterling's PR or something, but but yeah, like, look, we're not criticizing him because we want to criticize him. I think no Arsenal fan would say we want Raheem Sterling to fail. We want him to be good, but our eyes aren't lying to us. Like, there's nothing that's happening that we aren't seeing.
And there's only for so long that you can take history into account before you have to start looking at the here and now. And the history should be a part of your decision, but when the here and now is as bad as it is, then you can't look at that as a reason to play him, essentially. There's been some suggestions in the chat. Tierney to start, is that something you would look at? I mean, for me, no, but it's an option, I guess.
As a left winger?
As a left winger, yeah.
I mean, it's a bit desperate, isn't it? But yeah,
my big problem as well. My big problem as well with the Tierney stuff, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago when we were trying to figure out who we were going to play. if you're playing Kieran Tierney, you're playing Kieran Tierney because he gets forward and crosses. If you play Trossard up front, unless he puts exclusively low crosses into the penalty area, then what the hell is the point? Like if you had Marino up front and you're talking about working the ball into the box early, I'd see that as a viable option. But Tierney crossing for Trossard, because Trossard has to play. Regardless of however it is that you opt to approach this issue, Leandro Trossard, for me, has to play. So that kind of...
Not even Trossard, but Ethan Nwaneri as well. Like, that's the other guy he's going to be crossing to. So, it's not going to work.
No, it's not. What else have we got? Lots of good questions. Goon Gang says, have we tried Sterling centrally yet? I mean, would you put him centrally? Is that maybe the last resort to see if we can actually extract anything out of him? He's played that role before, to be fair.
No, because like the thing about him is that he gets the ball, and as we've said so many times, like a broken record, he tries to take people on, doesn't quite work, and then he just reverts to playing the safe pass, and that's just, you've got even more time and space on the wing. You can't be doing that centrally. Like, it literally just completely derail what we're doing through the center of the pitch. So yeah, sorry to be blunt, but no.
Paul Woodrow says, thoughts on a system that overloads the midfield with some of the guys crashing the box.
Yeah,
I feel like that's kind of what we're trying to do anyway. I feel like with Marino coming on, that was what we were trying to do. And we touched on it last Friday, didn't we? I think when we were talking about the team, we were talking about getting Declan Rice up alongside the forward as early and as quickly as possible. And we saw Arsenal try to make that happen, I think, in the first half of the game on a few occasions. Didn't quite come off, but the idea was there and the idea was right. So, I mean, this makes a bit of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, it's basically what we're talking about when we're saying, when we're playing someone out of position up front, he needs other players to fill in for his deficiencies. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about Declan Rice getting in the box. We're talking about Odegaard getting to the edge of the box and being more involved rather than a deeper or drifting out to the right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing as well as overloading the box is using the fullbacks. If you can't go through the middle, then you need to go wide. And yeah, I think that's, Ethan Nwaneri is getting to the point where attackers are they're very aware of what he can offer right now. And, he's incredible because he's got that real burst of acceleration where he can get a yard and get a cross in like he did last week. But I think we're going to start to see defenders get wise to that and put two men on him, maybe even three, because he's just so dangerous. So if defenders are going to do that, then we need the width from the fullback. So maybe that's something that Timber will be asked to do, or Ben White.
Yeah, we'll see, of course. Chib Maniac says, I think you guys are overblowing how bad the Sterling performances are. He's been bad, but I watched Willian start in, week out for Arsenal for a year, and it was shocking. Well, it wasn't a year, but also Willian's contract was terminated. Like, he wanted away as well. That's how bad it got, right? This is different because it's a loan, and obviously the circumstances around it are different. But just because Willian played when he shouldn't have, it doesn't mean that we have to, pretend that Raheem Sterling's performances are good. Like, I would love nothing more than for Raheem Sterling to play the game on Saturday and be the match winner, because I feel like we desperately need him to get going. We all know it's in there. We've all seen it in the past. Are those days where he's brilliant far sort of less frequent these days? Of course they are. And we accept that, but we just need to extract something out of him for a month and a half, maybe 2 months to get us through this period. And unfortunately, there is no evidence right now that he can give that to us. So when people say we're being harsh or we're overblowing it, I just completely disagree with that. Mike, am I wrong? Am I being harsh?
No.
If I'm positive, I'm too positive. And when I'm negative, I'm overblowing it. I don't know where to stand.
Yeah, and it's that kind of thing that we've spoken about. Is that it's when things aren't necessarily going in your favor, like with the injury crisis, there's kind of certain players that really divide opinion. And we're basically just creating an argument out of nothing as Arsenal fans sometimes, and I think Raheem Sterling is definitely the kind of player that we do that over, because it's like, you know, it's not going well, but then people will go back to, oh well, he's done it before, so surely he can do it again. But it's that thing of, as you say, how much longer can you look at what he's done in the past as a predictor of what's going to happen in the future? That unfortunately, that's just not how it works. And you know, I think the thing with Sterling is that, and what's so clear to see, is that he played too much football when he was young, and we saw it with Wayne Rooney, and we've seen it with countless other players, that they're overexposed to football when they're 17, 18, and it just means that, you know, although he's 30, is he 31? Really, like in his body, he's probably more like 35, 36 in terms of how many games he's played, how many miles he's put into it. So we're just being realistic about that. Like, we're not saying that you know, that if he went somewhere else and the environment was right, he'd never be able to do it. But I just think at the highest level, when we are at the highest level, it's not enough.
Yeah, exactly. Jid says, wait, you're desperate to see him get going, but you want him on the bench, or even for us to change formations and play people out of position just to exclude him. It's not just to exclude him, it's to get the best out of this team. I don't understand what is so difficult to comprehend about that. I want him to get going, yes, but do I think it's likely? No. So I've got to weigh up how likely it is that Raheem Sterling's going to get going versus the damage it's doing us having a player who's offering nothing in the team. And I've got to make a decision if I'm the manager of Arsenal Football Club. Now, I'm not. And so that decision doesn't ultimately come down to me. But my opinion is simple. Okay. The chances of Raheem Sterling finding it, getting back into the level that we've all seen him play at in the past over the course of this next month and a half, when we desperately need him to, are far lower than the damage that it's doing him being in the team. So change the formation, because we need to get creative. We ain't got many choices, guys. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And I don't understand why so many people are sort of, are sort of pushing back. If only there was that same energy for Kai Havertz. You know, Kai Havertz, who offers so much more to this Arsenal team and gets pelters every week. But for some reason, people have got this weird loyalty to Raheem Sterling, who isn't even an Arsenal player. Like that's the bit that anyway. Mike, let's round off with our predictions then for this one. I'll let you go first.
Well, I said 1-0 last week and I wasn't too far off. So I'm hoping I'll get it right. Well, actually, I'm not hoping it'll be 1-0, but I'm going to go for 1-0, basically. I think we're going to get a lot of 1-0s between now and the end of the season, and it might be against West Ham.
I'm going to go for a 3-0 Arsenal, and I think Nwaneri is going to score a brace. And then we're going to say, hold on a minute, we can win it. We don't need a striker. We got Nwaneri, and we're going to put all our hopes on this poor young man. But yeah,
I would love that to happen. And I think he's had some amazing moments, but he needs his kind of Jack Wilshere against Barcelona moment, if that makes sense. Like, I think it's not necessarily it's not going to come against West Ham, but imagine like he scores the winner against Liverpool or at
Real Madrid.
But I can see it for him. I can, looking into a crystal ball, I can see him being that kind of clutch player. Like, I just think he is that guy. And so yeah, like I'm envisaging that. And hopefully it can start up a brace against West Ham.
Hopefully it can. Big game coming up at the weekend. Arsenal take on West Ham United at Emirates Stadium. Kickoff 3 p.m. on Saturday. It's not televised in the UK, but you can listen to full commentary on the BBC Sport website. I'll be on commentary with former Arsenal player Jimmy Carter, not the ex-US president, but the former gunner, Jimmy Carter. That will be fun. You can listen to the game in full, so come over and join us on the BBC Sport website. And looking forward to that. Leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and if you're listening to us on audio, leave us a review. Mike, let people know where they can follow you and what you are up to.
Yeah, Mike_Stavrou. I'm over on Blue Sky a lot. I wanted to shout out, actually, if that's all right, an episode I did on the Tactics podcast yesterday where we got someone from a data company, and it really blew my mind in terms of how clubs use data in player analysis, and and recruitment, and especially the use of AI. So just to give I know we've got to go, but a very, very brief explainer.
Go for it.
So this company use the broadcast footage, and
Right.
that typically you can maybe see 15 players on a pitch, and they send that to clubs to do their analysis. But what they do is they simulate using AI where the other players on the pitch would be. So they're giving them a full picture, a complete picture to help their analysis. That's just an idea of kind of like where we're going and how it all works. But for me, it was kind of like I didn't actually know that any of this stuff went on, and there's loads of stuff like that throughout the episode. There's really good examples of different clubs that they've worked with and things like that. So yeah, go and give it a listen. It's the Athletic FC Tactics podcast.
Make sure you do. It's a brilliant podcast. I haven't listened to that particular episode yet, but I will do now on my way into work. Mike, thank you so much. As always, thank you to everybody who's joined us in the live chat, who'll be watching or listening to this back, and we'll be back very, very soon with another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.